Hello and welcome to another edition of Football Express. I'm Stephen Looney and joining me in the studio today are Paul Leeman, Glenn Ferguson and Mark McIntosh. You're all very welcome, gentlemen. As ever, a quick recap of last weekend's results in the Sports Direct Premiership. Friday, September 20th, Larne 2, Glentoran 0. Saturday, September 21, Ballymena Utd 3, Cliftonville 2. Coleraine 2, Loughgall 0. Crusaders 0, Portadown 3. Glenavon 1, Dungannon Swifts 1, and Linfield 1, Carrick Rangers 0. On Tuesday night there during the week, Larne beat Loughgall 2-0, and looking ahead to the Sports Direct Premiership fixtures this weekend, it's Larne again, fulfilling their domestic fixtures. Cliftonville versus Larne at Solitude. Saturday, September 28th, Coleraine against Linfield, Dungannon Swifts versus Carrick Rangers, Glentoran v Glenavon, Loughgall v Crusaders, and Portadown versus Ballymena Utd. Okay, Paul, we're going to start with Larne. They beat Loughgall on Tuesday night. They're playing Cliftonville Friday night. Next week they're playing Molde in the Europa Conference League. And in the middle of all this, manager Tiernan Lynch has been linked with the St Johnstone job in Scotland. In fact, they're interested in him. We believe he's talked to them. And this move follows on from Raith Rovers offering David Healy a job, which David turned down. It remains to be seen if the Saints can tempt Tiernan Lynch. Let me put it directly to you, Paul, to get the ball rolling. Should Tiernan stay or should he go?
It's a difficult one. It'll be a difficult one for Tiernan. I'm sure he's an ambitious coach. He's certainly probably one of the best coaches in this league. He's proven that over a number of years now. But Larne are on a real high at this moment in time. You know, everything's set up for the club, you know, to dominate over the next number of years. I know his brother is a big part of his backroom team. Could that be, you know, a major part of the equation, whether he would stay or whether he would go? So he's got a lot to think about. But I don't see Kenny Bruce letting him go without a fight, you know, if St Johnstone do want him. But I do think Tiernan will speak to them. You've mentioned he spoke to him. I'm sure that's the right thing to do, because, you know, it's right to go and speak to these teams, give them their place and see what the opportunity fully involves. But, you know, it's no surprise that, you know, full-time Scottish professional clubs are coming in and taking a look and trying to prize him away from Larne, because the job that he's done at Larne, people talk about the money, the investment, and it's quick to overshadow the job that he has done. He's done a fantastic job. They're so well coached. His recruitment has been excellent. So I can see why teams are coming after him, but I don't see Larne letting him go without a fight. And I think, yes, he will explore the opportunity, but I do think that he will stay at Larne.
Thanks, Paul, for that. Glenn, there's a lot to discuss on this. I think Tiernan has also been linked with the Hearts job as well. As Paul says, the success that he and Larne have had is incredible. They're trailblazers. I would possibly venture, we don't know what maybe financial packages and terms and conditions are. I would maybe venture that Larne's facilities these days are as professional as a lot, even in the top flight in Scotland, bar the big guys. The context of this is, of course, David Healy was offered, well, they were close to an agreement at Raith Rovers, and he decided at the 11th hour not to go. How much, you know, we know that Tiernan's ambitious. Is this a good opportunity? And I'll give a bit of context here as well. What they did at Larne took 5-6 years to get together. Being devil's advocate, it's a great opportunity, but if he goes in there and things don't work out, if he can't get his staff or whatever, maybe he's going to end up out of work, God forbid, you know, 9 months down the line and further back than he started.
Yeah, I think that's the way it is. The shelf life of a manager in both England and Scotland wouldn't be as long as what you might get in the Irish League. But I think financially, there's only going to be one winner of this, and it's Tiernan. You know, if he goes to St Johnstone, his salary is going to increase to what he's on at Larne. If he doesn't go, he's got the opportunity now to push Larne for a longer contract with more money. But I think when he looks at the bigger picture and looks at what Larne have done over the last 5 years, where they've came from to where they are, they're winning trophies, they're playing in Europe. And no disrespect, he's not going to do that with St Johnstone. He's going to be getting in there, he's going to be firefighting basically every week against better teams, better clubs, and he's going to be under immense pressure to try and get results. Where now what he's at Larne, what he's achieved, what the whole club have achieved, league champions 2 years in a row, they're now playing the group stages of European football. You know, and as I say, that's what players want to do, that's what managers want to do. And Tiernan's not going to do that with St Johnstone. So it's whether he wants to take that step into a managerial role where he thinks he can change the fortunes of St Johnstone. Whether that happens or not, or whether he has the financial backing to do it, remains to be seen. But it's certainly a conversation he'll have with the club, and he thinks it's right for him. Good luck to him. Him and David have done remarkably well over the last 7, 8, 9 years, and deserve their chances if it comes along. Whether Tiernan takes it, as I say, it's entirely up to him.
Thanks, Glenn. Yes, Mark, it's a very, very difficult one, and clearly it'll be a personal decision. It's up to Tiernan. We don't know, so we're only commenting, looking on from afar as such. It is an opportunity. I mean, we hear about ambition, and sort of part of me is going, well, if he doesn't take St Johnstone, and if David didn't take Raith Rovers, what are they waiting for? Where are they going to go? What are their options? Equally, I get entirely how good things are at Larne. Maybe Larne insiders would sort of say, things are good now, but what in a year's time, in 2 years' time, when Linfield come back at us, when Glentoran come back at us, when Cliftonville, Crusaders, whatever, maybe we'll not always be top dogs. His currency is really, really high at the minute. So there's a huge amount of things to consider for Tiernan here.
Yeah, and look, if we're all being honest, I would say the league appeals to him more than the club. As Glenn rightly said, he's going to be firefighting every week. St Johnstone are struggling. Looks like it's going to be like that all season. Tiernan would back himself that he can maybe get them up the table, but I think that's a big, big ask. In terms of managers, though, I think managers over here, rightly for years, have maybe been a bit annoyed that they've never really got a look in when it comes to decent jobs in England and Scotland. But at the same time, they have to be realistic. I actually don't think it's realistic that Tiernan could jump from Larne to Hearts, for instance. I think that would be far too big a leap. It's one thing being a full-time manager in the Irish League. It's another thing being a full-time manager in a full-time league. The amount of media duties even, and I don't think Tiernan would overly enjoy that. There's so much to consider. I would actually agree with Paul. I think he probably won't take it in the end. I just think it's too big a gamble, for all the reasons you said. If it doesn't go well, could he be out of a job in 6 months or at the end of the season? He's on a great thing at Larne. He's got them into the league stages of Europe. He'll want to see how they do. Maybe he can reassess it in January. Who knows where Larne are in the league, and maybe Europe's over by that stage. You can maybe look at it again. But I think the big thing for him is how he goes about this. And the one thing about Tiernan since he became a manager was that he's always conducting himself in the right way. And I think that's going to be a big thing. Don't toy with St Johnstone if you don't really have interest. I think he's right to speak to them. And I think they'll know straight away whether he's interested or not.
Thanks, Mark. And I kind of agree with the panel that the big thing for me is I'm not sure Tiernan would want to leave Larne at the minute, having got to the league phase, the group stages, whatever way you want to call it, for the first time, first Northern Irish team to do it. He's in the middle of it, he's in the cusp of the league stages. I'm not sure he would leave for St Johnstone, if that's not being too disrespectful. But then let me widen it out a wee bit. We've talked for years, as you say, about managers here maybe not getting a look in. We've had 2 Scottish clubs linked with 2 of our managers. One said no, one manager said no, David Healy. If another says no, will that have an impact in Scotland on managers over here?
Well, look, it's possible. And you only have to look at Oran Kearney, was probably the last manager. He did a great job keeping St Mirren up, but he wasn't prepared to move there full time. And, that caused major issues, and that's why he left after one season. So I can understand maybe why Scottish clubs are maybe think twice about looking at managers in the Irish League. That said, you have to look at their records, and Tiernan's doing a great job. Like I said, I don't think his stock will ever be higher than it is now. So, if he does want to move, he holds all the cards now. And as Glenn said, financially, he's going to be a winner out of this.
I think it'll be a test for Tiernan as well. Tiernan came in out of the Championship into the Irish Premier League and wanted to test himself against the best, the David Jeffreys, the David Healey's, the Stephen Baxters, and he's done that. He's went above them now and he's winning league championships. Does he now want to go and test himself, maybe not just St Johnstone, tactically against Celtic and Clermont at Rangers? Personally, does he want to go and test himself in that scenario against the big, and whoever Hearts bring in, I'm sure he'll be a big name as well. Does he want that test, irrespective of how bad St Johnstone is, him personally? And that could be a telling factor on whether he goes or not.
Tiernan will back himself to make those St Johnstone players better if he was to take the job. And as a coach and the people he'll bring in, you would expect that they would do that to some degree. But at Larne, he always has something else to fall back on. They can go into the transfer market, they can pay whatever they need to for somebody. He won't have that luxury at St Johnstone. I think that would be a a huge test for him.
Thanks. Paul, of course, in Scotland we've seen Stephen Robinson of this parish doing very well. Motherwell and St Mirren, and Jeremy Carroll has now moved to Newcastle to take on the under-21 job. So I think there is a bit more respect for an interest in Northern Irish managers and players. Now we're seeing that as well. Well, let me flip it on its head a wee bit. Say Tiernan were to go, how would it affect Larne?
I think it would affect him massively. He's put his stamp on that club over the last number of years, the way they want to play, the type of player that he wants to bring in. I'm sure he's had a big say in the whole infrastructure of the full-time setup. So it would be massive if they were to lose him, but I just can't see that Kenny Bruce would let him leave at this moment in time. I still think Tiernan Lynch, at the end of this season, Larne are still favourites to win the championship this year. There's no doubt about that with the squad that they have. I still think other opportunities might come up for him, whether it might not be now with St Johnstone or Hearts, possibly again in January when the European runs over, as Glenn said, possibly again if they win the league again this season. Teams will still be looking at it because it comes down to the results that he's getting, that structure that he's set up within the club. It's all, looking at Tiernan and speaking to him, he's a meticulous planner. He leaves no stone unturned. He's got good people around him. And if he were to leave, it would be massive. I just don't see them letting him leave at this moment in time. There's so much going on at Larne. But in the future, I still think there'll be opportunities there for Tiernan because he's so highly regarded.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Paul. Glenn, I'm going to wrap up on this and talk about football actually shortly, but I think what Mark said was very, very pertinent indeed. I agree. Tiernan has always conducted himself magnificently, doesn't rant or rave in the press, just keeps a relatively low profile, does his business excellent, I have to say, very professional. He and Kenny Bruce are very, very close. I think a lot of it comes down to how Tiernan conducts himself, i.e., I'm going to be careful here how I say this, but I think if he were to go to Scotland and say, guys, I'm involved with the Europa League at the minute with my own club, that's my focus at the minute, I really appreciate your interest, but not just at this time. I think that would be okay and accepted. I think David Healy's turning down of Raith Rovers left a sour taste, certainly in the mouths of people at Raith Rovers. But I agree with Paul. I think if Tiernan keeps his head down, there will be more opportunities further down the line.
Yeah, but sometimes when you miss an opportunity, that opportunity might not come up again. And at Larne, a telling factor, which, there's been rumours over the last number of months, maybe the Kenny Bruce might be wanting to take a step back as well at Larne. And, Tiernan has been very close with Kenny. And Tiernan might say if Kenny's not going to be around as much, as influential as much, maybe it might be time for him to move on, So there's a lot of soul searching and thinking to go on within Tiernan and within Larne. But if Tiernan does go, we wish him all the best and hope he's successful. But there'll be no shortage of candidates wanting that Larne job because they know what way the club is set up now and the financial backing they have, and there'll be a lot of people who would be really interested in that job.
Great insight, Glenn. Thank you very much. And just to finish it off on this, something that following on from what Glenn said, Mark, we know that Kenny Bruce and Tiernan Lynch are very, very close. It's a project, it's a vision they've shared from years ago when they were on their knees, the club. Again, sort of flip it on its head. Say Tiernan were to go now to St Johnstone or further down the line to another club. Would it maybe hasten Kenny's? Would it maybe leave Kenny thinking, right, well, this is kind of the end of the road? He's already sold 40% of the club. Would he think this is the end of Camelot?
Look, it is possible. But while there's still success there and there's European success, I don't see why Kenny would necessarily just say that's enough. I think he was probably right to bring outside investment in. That helps the club be sustainable for the future, so I think that's clever. But in terms of if Tiernan was to go, would that mean Kenny would probably go? I don't see it. I think there's still a lot there to excite him.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen, for that. Now we'll talk about actually matches and games. We're actually going to stay with Larne because they're playing Cliftonville tomorrow night. Cliftonville have only had one win in four, and it's 4 games without defeat for Larne. How's it going to go? And this is going to be a theme in this show because the form in recent weeks since the start of the season has been up and down and very, very hard to read at different times. We know Larne have had a fixture pile up and that carrying with European involvement. Cliftonville have up and down, did well a while ago, but have been stuttering of late.
The whole league's bonkers. Let's be honest. I've watched Cliftonville and thought, right, they're on track. Jim's got it sussed, and then all of a sudden, no, they go and lose to Ballymena last week, and you're like, okay, right, start again. And likewise, pretty much every club. And Larne didn't convince me in the slightest against Linfield a couple of weeks ago. They had one chance and they took it and won the game. I don't think they're anywhere near their groove just yet, although I think that this could be a really fascinating game. I think there'll be goals in it. But see, at the minute, I just think you just throw a blanket around most of the clubs and just who knows what order they're going to be in it by the end of the weekend.
Thanks, Mark. Indeed, yes. Larne have changed as well a wee bit. I'd sort of say them are a bit younger in the middle of the park. We know Leroy Miller's out and we know that, and their midfield, there's more emphasis on younger players. They've brought younger players in. They've had players missing. Same could be said about Cliftonville. We've talked about their strikers, etc. Rory Hale's coming back for the Reds. He'll be a vital player. If you were a betting man, Glenn, would you go near this fixture?
No, I wouldn't, to be honest. You could go either way. I just think the only consistent thing about the league is the inconsistency of a lot of the teams. We look at even Crusaders at the start of the season, started well and they've lost 3 in a row. Carrick's signed well and they've lost 6 or 7 in a row. Linfield can't seem to score goals at the minute, but they're still top of the league. We're talking about Larne dropping points at the start of the season. If they win their 2 games in hand, they're joint top of the league. It's just mad. As Mark said, the word bonkers. So you just don't know what way it's going to go. And Cliftonville went and got beaten by Ballymena, who are on a great run, but could go and beat Larne because of the quality of player they have in their team. And as you say, Rory Hale makes a very, very, really, really good difference to them. Because I worried about Cliftonville when they lost, Wilson and Ashford and Ronan and Hale at the start of the season, thinking where's the goal's going to come from. But Joe Gormley, the goal, has come up with a few, and they've other players there who are chipping in. So this game could go either way. Larne have the quality, of course, to win the game, but so do Cliftonville. So it's intriguing, and I'm not sure Paul might be working on it. Are you? No. He's not working at this time. So it's a tough one to call.
Thanks, Glenn. Going up again for prompting debate here. I'm mindful that they're playing Molde next week. Larne, this is in Europe. I don't think Conor McHenry played the other night, so I don't know whether he's going to protect players for Molde for Europe. And I'm going to put it to you, couch it this way, Paul. If you were Tiernan Lynch, what would you rather do well in Europe or win the league title again?
I think you've got to look at your bread and butter, your league title. I think he'll look at what his best possible team available is for the Cliftonville game this week, take care of that game, and then you look at the next game, which is a European game. The Cliftonville game's a big one. As Glenn said, they're 2 games in hand. They can get back up to the top of the league. That will be their main focus, and then Europe will take care of itself. As I mentioned before, the recruitment's been excellent. They've got the strength and depth in the squad that they're able to mix it around if they need to. You mentioned the midfield has been a lot younger, but there's still experienced players that come back into their squad. So I think that will be, the challenge and the test for Tiernan. How he manages a squad, players. You've got to try and keep players fresh as much as possible. But from a player's perspective, and I know Glenn will say the same, I would love to be in that squad at this moment in time. Playing every game's a big game. You're playing in the big league game this Friday. You get that one over and you're playing in a European game next week. As a player, there's no better thing. You'll be wanting to play in every game, and I think the test for Tiernan will be how he manages a squad, but the focus will still be on the bread and butter of the league championship.
And just to finish on Larne, people have asked me a lot of time, big squad at Larne, as you say, 2 players for every position, real quality players too. How's he going to keep them happy, Tiernan, And my answer's always been, well, they've won 2 league titles and they're playing on the group stages of Europe, so that'll help.
It will help, and I'm sure their bonus helped for getting through to Europe as well. It keeps boys happy, but no, it's an exciting time to be involved at the club. The players will just want to be part of it. Ultimately, yes, they all want to play, but there's so many games coming up. I think I read something last week that Larne are going to be playing a game every 3.5 days over the next number of weeks. So as a player, you're going to get your opportunities, and it's up to you when you get that opportunity is to stay in the team and be involved in these big games.
Thanks, Paul. Going to look at other games. There's a lot to talk about because it's so topsy-turvy. League leaders Linfield travel to Coleraine to face a Bandsiders team who are unbeaten in 4 games. The Blues have only won 1 game in 4. It's an intriguing test. Coleraine I feared for a wee bit, Glenn, at the start, but they've come strong. Linfield I thought started very strong, but again have, not say lost their way, but have stumbled a wee bit in recent weeks. So how do you see it panning out? And I'm going to say to you, it's played at the showgrounds. Do you think the surface will help Coleraine?
I think it will. You know, obviously they're training on every day now. They're full time. That transition, it's probably taken them a while just to get used to it. But they're starting to get results now. Linfield have always found it difficult down there, no matter whether it's a grass pitch, whether it's the 4G pitch, the way it is now. Even last year, I think we went down and got beat 3-0 down there. You know, so David will be under no illusions. He knows it's going to be a difficult game. His thought process now, well, we need to start taking chances, because Linfield are creating chances, but not scoring goals, not scoring enough goals to win matches, and that's what the problem's been. And listen, it's not as if nobody can see that. We're watching the games week in, week out, and we can see that, and he's no under no illusions. He knows, and he's hammering it into the players that we need to start taking chances, being more ruthless, get bodies in the box, and that's what they need to do. And I think once that starts to happen, then the momentum will start to build again. But listen, Saturday's going to be a really, really tough game for them.
Thank you, Glenn. Mark, I think I've asked you previously, where are Linfield? You know, and I think the last time I was asking you, because when Linfield were going well and we were saying, so I'm going to ask you again, kind of where are Linfield, because Glenn's couched it very, very well. Goals have dried up. Any cause for concern? And with the game against Coleraine, I think it's going to be a tough test, just the way Linfield are going at the minute and the way Coleraine are going.
Yeah, and I think I said in the last show, even though Linfield had scored quite a lot of goals at the start of the season, that there were bigger tests ahead, and I wasn't overly convinced that there were lots of goals in the team. And that's the way it's proved. You know, Matthew Fitzpatrick's having a bit of a tough time. You know, he's certainly getting chances, he's not taking them. I don't think it's on him, because he does a lot of the ugly work as well that maybe goes unseen by a lot of people. But yeah, Linfield just can't rely on a moment of magic in every game from somebody. You know, it was Kirk Miller last week. You know, they need more than that. Glenn used the word ruthless. That's the big thing. Going back to the Larne game, they weren't ruthless in either box. And if you do that, you're not going to win leagues. And I think they have to get that sorted very quickly. I think most people will probably come back to their summer transfer business and did they do enough? I personally don't think so. When you look at, you know, what Larne have done as well. So I really don't know where Linfield are. I know come the end of the season where Linfield will be. They'll be thereabouts, because history tells us that's what they do. But I think they have to show more than they have done so far.
Okay, thanks for that. Just going to move on to the next fixture now, and I'll stay with you before going to the boys. Dungannon Swifts versus Carrick Rangers. 2 surprise packages this season, possibly for different reasons. We said last time Rodney's in the groove at Stangmore Park. Wee bit of a stumble there against improving Glenavon last week. Again, the topsy-turvy form of this bonkers league, as you called it. And Carrick Rangers, again, I saw them in the first game of the season against Glenavon. Very impressive, very strong, very purposeful. And now they've lost 7 in a row. You know, so they're under pressure. But then again, it took a late winner for Linfield to beat them last week.
Yeah, look, that'll be a kick in the teeth for Stuart King and his players last week, but it'll also give them a bit of hope, the fact that they've gone to Linfield, they've frustrated Linfield, and they lost it in the last seconds. You know, a lot of these games that they've lost so far, they've been second best from start to finish. But Dungannon have really impressed me. Since the last time we did a show, I've seen them twice. I like the football they play. They can mix it up a bit. Look at different types of players. They've got experience, they've got youth. And you rightly mentioned, you know, they maybe, you know, after a couple of good results, they drew against Glenavon, but they were down to 10 men. You know, they were 1-0 up when they go down to 10 men. And that always plays a big part in it. But Dungannon have really, really impressed me, I have to say. Carrick, I was going to say you never quite know what you're going to get, but at the minute you do. And I think Stuart will be feeling the heat. You know, he's talked about having sleepless nights with the job, but I think we all keep looking at it. The experience and the quality they have within their squad, it has to turn sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Mark. It's a subject, I'm going to focus on Carrick just now at the moment, Glenn. I've seen a lot of Carrick and I've spoken a lot to Stuart after games, and he said, and he's right, he has an injury crisis. Now, is that a mitigating factor? Is that, you know, will that help his plight, the fact that he's got players unavailable? Because kind of the way I look at it is, I don't know if what's in Carrick's mind or Stuart's mind, but say you were to take Stuart out of the firing line, bring somebody in, is he going to get the players back any quicker from injury?
I looked at the squad last week that played Linfield, and I don't know whether he's just got a couple of players back for that game. For me, his squad last week was pretty strong. And Curtis Allen was on the bench, Rhys Glendenning was on the bench, with some other players who've been in the squad all year. His starting 11 was strong, so we can all make excuses about results, and this isn't by no means having a go at Stuart. We can have a look at it. I think the players need to look at themselves as well, and it's okay recruiting good players. And again, I'm not being harsh, but just being truthful. The Luke McCullochs and Joe Crows and Sean Clucas didn't do it for Glentoran, so why are they going to expect them to be doing it for Carrick? They're bigger names coming to a so-called lesser team. They should be standing out, and at this moment in time they're not. They need to stand up and be counted and bring the rest of the boys around and get them galvanised to try and get a result, and that's not happening. And Stuart's getting the brunt of it, sleepless nights, and he says it's affecting his family life. When that happens, it's time to give it a go. Walk away from it. Once it starts to affect your health and your family life, irrespective of whether you love football or not, and whether you're not called a quitter, if it starts to affect, in my personal opinion, starts to affect your health, your family, it's time to give up. There's other people letting Stuart down. It's not Stuart King, because he gives it everything every week, 100%. As we see him on the touchlines, he's relentless. He's like a spring bunny. He's always wanting to run about the place, give instructions. There's people letting Stuart down at this moment in time, and it's not him or his backroom staff, it's the players on the pitch.
Thank you. Paul, you obviously Glentoran's your hinterland. If the three players that Glenn mentioned weren't doing it at Glentoran, why would they do it at Carrick?
I suppose you could say the same about, Shea McCartan and Aaron McCarry have gone to Portadown. Aaron McCarry's actually started the season brilliantly in goals for him. Shea McCartan, I still think, failed and hit the heights that he had at Ballymena. So there's an argument for it, but I suppose Stuart thought that, whatever was going on at the Oval, these players probably weren't happy for whatever reason. He could maybe get them in, bring the best out in them, get them to a different level playing for Carrick. But it certainly has been a tough start for them, and there's probably more pressure on Stuart this year because they finished so well last year. They finished 7th, their best ever finish in the European playoffs. They went out and invested in the squad, and people probably expected that they were going to be one of the teams up there fighting in the top half. It hasn't happened for them. There's been a lot of injuries, yes, but all teams have injuries. That's why you have more depth in the squad, which he has this year. So, and I'm sure Stuart's not using that as his only excuse. It's been a difficult start for them. The players do have to perform better. That hasn't been happening, and he'll be hoping he can turn things around, but there's certainly a bit of pressure on him there, Carrick, at this moment in time.
What about the Swift saying as well? I mean, we just mentioned earlier on about how well they've done under Rodney. Would you expect, do you expect any respite for Carrick Rangers down there at Stangmore Park on Saturday, or do you think Dungannon will come out with the points?
I think Dungannon are obviously favourites in that tie, given the current form and the current, certainly, performance levels have been good for Dungannon. They've been on the back of a draw to Glenavon to defeat the Portadown, which they probably should have got more out of. So their performance levels have been consistent. So for that reason, I would expect that they'll be favourites in that game. And I think Rodney McIntosh has done a super job so far early in this season. He's signed well. I think John McGovern's been a shrewd signing for him. They've got that influx of youth always coming through at Dungannon. There's a few experienced heads in there, and they're a decent side at this moment in time, and it's whether they can keep that level of consistency that a lot of teams are showing at this moment in time.
Following on from that, I'm going to stay with you, Paul, because the next fixture we're going to talk about is Glentoran against Glenavon. Talking about inconsistencies, Glentoran are another team with 1 win in their last 4 games. Glenavon are another team unbeaten in 4 with 3 draws and a win. Hard to know which team will turn up for either manager.
Glenavon a few weeks ago against Crusaders just came and camped in. Crusaders couldn't break them down and they hit them on the break, and I imagine they'll have the same tactics going to the Oval this Saturday. They'll sit back, they'll try and frustrate Glentoran, and Glentoran's biggest problem for me has been the lack of creativity, and they haven't been clinical when the chances have came, probably similar to what Glenn said about Linfield there. There are a few plus points at Glentoran. I think Dylan Connolly's looked good in glimpses, but overall they're not creating enough chances and they're not scoring enough goals, and obviously they haven't been keeping them out at the other end either. So it's been that inconsistency for Declan Devine will be the most frustrating thing for him, and for me, from the outside looking in, I look at Glentoran, they've probably struggled a bit at Portadown. They lost away to Dungannon, they lost to Ballymena, and Glentoran are full time. They've got really good players, and I think so far in this stage of the season they're underperforming, underachieving for me.
Thanks, Paul. Probably not on their own either. A number of teams that we have discussed and will discuss again. Glentoran against one of your former clubs, Glenavon, who started off very, very poorly, and Stevie McDonald was under a bit of pressure. They haven't turned it around the way Ballymena have done, but they have started to claw, get points here and there, as I said, unbeaten in 4. So Glentoran against Glenavon at the Oval. Glenn, any idea how it's going to turn out?
As Paul alluded to there, the way Glenavon are set up against the so-called bigger teams, they're going out not to get beat, more so to go and try and win the game, stay in the game as long as possible. I think they've done that against Larne as well, they sat in camp, and Stephen says he got his tactical ideas completely 100% right and got a result. But going to the Oval, I'm being honest, I worry for Glentoran as well, and that might sound strange coming from a Linfield man, but the amount of people that went out the door from Glentoran at the end of the season, and the replacements haven't been any better, to be totally honest, and there maybe hasn't been enough come back in through the door to make Glentoran a force. Declan's come in saying he wants to bring, East Belfast and make Glentoran big again, and at this moment in time, it doesn't look as if that's going to happen. Simply because they don't have the quality of player, they don't have the personnel and strength and depth for me to make that happen. And there's players at the club who are really, really good players, but again aren't performing. Jay Donnelly 2 years ago was the top striker in the league, 30 goals. He's a shadow of himself, and he's not on his own. There are other players in that group who aren't performing, and again it's the manager that has to try and make the change and make the difference. And it's players are really letting managers down, and I think they just need to work harder. But again, that game can go either way. Glentoran have the ability and the players to win games, but they've also got the players to lose games as well, and unfortunately that's what's been happening recently.
Thanks, Glenn. Just finally finish with you on the Battle of the Glens as such, Mark. And just talking on strikers, Glenn's right. I mean, Glentoran have Jay Donnelly and David Fisher. They're both playing. They're not delivering the way that the Glentoran would have liked, Declan Devine would have liked. Both were transfer targets in the summer. And then flip it over to Glenavon and seen them quite a lot. Michael O'Connor and Davy McDade at the start of the season, they were off it for me, nowhere near it, and they were relying on James Doon and Keith Ward for a bit of creativity. In recent games, particularly against Crusaders, I've seen the two of those experienced pedigree strikers come to the fore a wee bit more. So it's intriguingly poised. I don't know, goals, I don't know, maybe fancy Glenavon possibly.
Yeah, it's another interesting one. I really couldn't call it. I think the big wide open pitch at the Oval will suit Glentoran. We've talked before about Glenavon narrowing their pitch at Mourneview for the way Stephen wants to play. But at the same time, having seen Glentoran this season, they wouldn't convince me that if Glenavon put everyone behind the ball, that they can break that down. I honestly think it's a toss of a coin. Glentoran have shown us, they were very good against Cliftonville a few weeks back. They've shown us they can play like that. And I think it's not even the fact that they've had to replace 15 players. They've brought so many players in who aren't used to the league. And I think that always takes time. So we shouldn't really be surprised when they are so inconsistent. But look, Paul knows better than anybody as well. The crowd at the Oval, they expect results no matter what. It doesn't wash for them that the fact that so many new players have come in and they're getting used to the league. They just want results. Decky expects results. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was another bad afternoon for Glentoran.
Thanks, Mark. Now, next up is Loughgall against Crusaders, and two teams who are in a bit of a rut. Loughgall have lost their last 4 games in a row, Crusaders their last 3. Any cause for alarm for either Dean Smith or Declan Cadell? And on this fixture on Saturday, who needs the win more?
Look, I think it's a bit of an alarming slump from Crusaders. Because that's such a positive start to the season. I saw them against Dungannon, and while they weren't great at Stangmore Park that night, they pretty much did everything but score. So I wouldn't be panicking too much. But again, I think with probably the complete change to training, the change in how they're playing, so many new players again at Crusaders, I think they're going to go through spells that, they'll have runs of victories and unbeaten runs, and then they maybe might go 3 or 4 games without a win. And I think people maybe just have to realise that this season it's going to be like that. There is transition. Whereas Dean Smith, we all know they had a great year last year. They can never replicate that probably. Losing Benji McGee, of course, was huge. And I think Dean Smith would have fully expected that it would be a much more difficult year. They're not getting blown away in games. They're losing, by a goal or 2. But I don't fancy Loughgall are going to get out of it anytime soon, if I'm being honest. I think they're going to continue to struggle. They will pick up victories, but come the end of the season, is that going to be enough? I'm not so sure. Thank you, Mark.
Glenn, Loughgall, yes, Mark's covered it well. They got up last year, did very, very well. Find it a bit sticky this season, certainly in recent games. Crusaders, a wee bit of cause for concern for me with the Cruisers. I wonder, our team's starting to work them out. Declan has got a particular approach. He's playing the same team where he can, and it's sort of patient, build up possession based and put pressure on the defence, which is great. And it's kind of been working well for large parts of the season. But if you don't get a breakthrough, with all that possession, and it's what's happening, Crusaders, bang, bang, sucker punch. Portadown were very impressive last weekend at Seaview, in punishing Crusaders for exactly the same thing. So, will it click for Declan Cadell at Loughgall, or will home advantage serve Dean Smith well?
It's going to be a tough game, down there on the tight pitch. I fear for Crusaders because they haven't scored in three games now. And Paul will know more than most, being about the CV for a long time. When Crusaders were going bad and things weren't happening, they could always call on Paul Heatley or Jordan Owens to pull them out of a hole. Just a bit of magic or a ball into the box, and that would give them the lift. They don't have them now. Adam Lackey's out, long-term injury now as well. So where the goals are going to come from, I know the new guy that got on, Tiernan, he scored a few goals, but I feel for Decky as well, because he's only just into the management game. And once you lose 2 or 3 in a row, you sort of go, you're judging yourself, and it's a real test for himself. Now, how do we get back at it? He's going to have to do something special to get out, and Loughgall could be the one. I think Loughgall last year was their honeymoon period, and Mark's right. I don't think they'll ever have a season like that again, and I think if you give Dean 10th place now, he'll snap your arm off for it. I think they'll struggle this year, and they'll probably look at it going, right, if we can be in round Ballymena and Dungannon, we have a chance of staying up again. But Ballymena have hit the heights, and Dungannon are playing well, so they have a struggle in their hands this year. So it'll be interesting to see, but this game could be 0-0 because none of the two teams are scoring any goals, so it could be a 0-0 draw.
Thanks, Glenn. Paul, you know Declan very well. You've been at Seaview, obviously, as a player. Strikers, Kieran Offord started very well, scored 4 goals. Harry Franklin, another new striker they've brought in, he's been playing a support role. Now Declan, from certainly listening to him after matches, he has complete faith in what he's doing. He says it just needs the players to gel a bit more, and it'll come. My slight worry about Harry Franklin is he neither fish nor foul? Is he a striker, or is he dropping off like he was an attacking midfielder a few years ago? Loughgall, funny enough, Benji McGee scored against for Larne on Tuesday night. So, is there cause for alarm in either camp?
Speaking about Crusaders, first of all, you mentioned Harry Franklin there. I think Harry Franklin, for a number of games there, played directly up front with Kieran Offord, and I think he's a good foil for Kieran Offord. But the last few games, Declan's maybe dropped him back into that deep role, and that's came about through Philip Lowry's been injured. He's had different injuries around that midfield area. So if he can get his midfielders back, that'll allow him to push Harry Franklin further up the park, and I think then Kieran Offord can be more effective then as a striker. So he'll be hoping that's the case, that he can get those players back. I don't think there's cause for concerns. I would worry that their squad is a bit light. I looked at their bench on Saturday against Portadown, and they ended up bringing on Jordan Owens, as Spike said. They can't just keep relying on Jordan. He's not the young man that he used to be. They did bring him on and go a little bit more direct at the end, but they need to have other options off the bench, and other options within the squad. Where that's going to come from, I'm not so sure. Obviously Ben Kennedy's moved on to Ballymena, and he's absolutely flying at this moment in time. So he is proven to be a big loss for Crusaders. Jordan Stewart is a player that Declan will be hoping hits the heights that we know he's capable of. He's picked up a little injury in the warm-up last week, so it's a wee bit frustrating stop-start at the minute for Crusaders, but I think if they're able to get the Jordan Stewarts, the Philip Lowrys, the Ross Clarks and those experienced players back with those young players that he's brought in and keep the balance and keep the sort of consistency of the team, I still think they'll get results again for Crusaders. I don't think it's time to panic just yet, but it's a tough game on Saturday, going away to Loughgall with some of those experienced players missing. Loughgall, I agree with Spike, last season phenomenal for them. I always thought going into the second season in the league it was going to be tough for them. Other teams have strengthened their squads, strengthened their depth, and Loughgall probably really haven't. They've lost Benji McGee as well, and I have to agree, I think they'll struggle. Where they can pick up points will be on their home patch. I think that they can make that a difficult place for teams to come, but when they go away from home it's going to be very, very tough for them.
Thanks, Paul. And the final fixture to look at, Portadown against Ballymena United. Again, in this crazy league. Ballymena started off poorly, and Jim was under a bit of pressure. Jim was under a bit of pressure. Portadown didn't have a great start either, and they got a couple of draws, and now they're 6 unbeaten. Ballymena United, what have they won now? 5 straight league wins, 6 in all competitions in recent games. Ben Kennedy, as you said there, he's been a superstar. He's caught fire for Ballymena. Interesting clash. Portadown were quite impressive now against Crusaders last weekend. So how do you see this game panning out?
This is such a tough one to call. Both teams in good form, both teams full of confidence. Ballymena, I've been impressed with Ballymena, whereas they're harder to beat. He set them up now, and I spoke to Jim after the Glentoran game, and he says that he's trying to get that message across to his players. They enjoy the defensive side of the game, so they're defending a lot better. They're set up nice and compact. The more difficult to beat, staying in games. That's the big thing you mentioned earlier. They're staying in games, and then when you've got someone like Ben Kennedy in the type of form that he's in, he's getting 1 or 2 chances in the game and taking them. And Ballymena have been excellent. And we talked about Ballymena last season, and losing became a bit of a habit for them. They're now winning, and winning's becoming a habit. You can see there's a little bit of a buzz around the camp there. And credit to them for the run that they've been on, because, like you say, Jim was under a bit of pressure there. They've turned the corner around and they're playing very well. But equally Portadown are, and I was the first I saw them last week against Crusaders, and I was impressed by them again, impressed by how they were set up, how they like to play on the break. They've got a lot of energy in the team. They're a big, strong side, and they cause Crusaders a lot of problems. So that's a tough game to call. I think going by both sides, it'll probably be a high-scoring game, maybe a 2-2 or 3-2. I'm going to go for Ballymena in it because they've got the momentum.
Thanks, Paul. Glenn, Ballymena very well, obviously being there as a manager. One thing I have to pay tribute to Portadown last week against Crusaders. Their industry, Paul, I thought was phenomenal. I mean, they had a game plan. You're seeing in the second half, guys sprinting to reset, to get their position, 2 banks of 4, to snuff Crusaders out. It was really, really impressive. Ballymena we know about. They're not a one-man team at all, but Ben Kennedy seems to be the touchstone for them. Yeah,
listen, Jim in particular deserves a lot of credit. What he inherited last year at Ballymena, the players that left, the financial state of the club, and to keep them up was great. This year, the board have backed him. They've given the finances. He's been able to bring players in. He's been able to play a better style of football, defend, set up the way that he wants, and they're getting results. Portadown likewise, the players have come up, they've come up from the championship. I watch the championship quite a bit, and it's like that, the industry in the championship, they work their socks off. So the players that Niall has brought up with the added bit of quality is making them into a better team as well, and both clubs deserve a lot of credit for backing their managers. Jim stayed up, Niall's came up, and they've given the finances to try and compete, and that's what they don't want to be, a yo-yo club up and down, up and down. They've given them the money to try and compete and to try and win matches, and both clubs are doing that. Ballymena haven't just beaten teams in and around. They've beaten Glentoran, they've beaten Larne, beaten Cliftonville. Massive results, and Portadown are going to Seaview and winning big games as well. So it's great for both teams. Delighted for both managers, and as Paul says, this game could go either way. And they have players on either team who can score goals, and it could be. Pity that one wasn't on Sky or on BBC iPlayer, because it'd be a good one to watch.
Certainly would be. Promises to be a cracker. Can Ballymena sustain this? Can they be players this? Can they be contenders this season? And on the game itself, Portadown against Ballymena, who's going to come out on top?
Listen, I don't think they're going to be league contenders. I think they'll certainly pick up lots of victories. John Heron is to come into the side, in the next couple of weeks as well. He'll add quality and experience. I think the big thing for them is the likes of Kim Nelson, Nathan Devine getting goals as well against Cliftonville. It's not just Ben Kennedy, because they won't be able to rely on Ben. And if we've learned anything about Ben since he came back to the Irish League, is that he doesn't play for a full season. So that has to be in their minds as well, that's a strong possibility. But to me, this is game of the day. You know, I think Portadown, anytime I've seen them, I've been very impressed. I think their season start has been better than their points show. I think Portadown are more than capable of getting a win. But like the lads have said, I just think the momentum that Ballymena have, I would fancy Ballymena to get a victory. But it could be a high-scoring game again.
Let's hope so. Okay, that's it for today. Mark and Glenn and Paul, thanks for your comment and your contribution. That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you the next time on Football Express.